Hi, I'm Ron Bullis, the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Advisors. And I want to take a minute in this video to share with you why it's so important to start with understanding your values before you go into financial planning. At LifeWorks Advisors, we get asked all the time by clients, by other advisors, by people in our industry, Ron, why do you spend so much time talking about values and vision? And why is that so important? So I want to give a quick personal story to set the background for why we start with values here at LifeWorks. It was somewhere in 2015, early 2015. I was still working for a large national wealth management firm, and I got a phone call from my father, who was an active duty law enforcement at the time. And him and I chatted regularly. It wasn't unusual for him to call me during the middle of the week. But something was different with this phone call. I could tell he was a little off. And I said to him, Dad, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, really? But what's the matter? Why did you call? And he said, well, Ronnie, I can't share all the details right now, but we were serving a felony arrest warrant. Somebody jumped out of a closet, put a gun to my head, and my partner had to draw his service weapon and shoot him. And my dad said, I was just calling to tell you that I loved you. And my reply back to him, I can still hear it today. My reply back to him without even thinking was, I love you too, Dad. Stay safe. I'm not ready to be you yet. Now, my dad and I live in different worlds in terms of our job. I'm in wealth management. At the time, I was wearing a suit and tie. I dealt with family businesses, successful executives, people with money. My dad, as a full-time law enforcement officer, dealt with the opposite end of society. Oftentimes those at the bottom end of the economic spectrum that had criminal backgrounds, that were violent. And so I thought to myself, why did I say I'm not ready to be you yet? Is what he does or who he is actually important to me and what I do in my job here at LifeWorks? So I packed up my stuff from my office. I remember going home, and around that same time, I heard Steve Jobs' commencement speech from Stanford. I don't know how it popped up, maybe on my YouTube feed. And he was talking about how important it is to recognize that we're already dead, that our time is valuable, that we shouldn't live somebody else's life. And I listened to that speech over and over and over again. And what I started asking myself is the question, is what I'm doing right now as a financial advisor, is how I'm helping my clients, how I want to spend the rest of my life. In fact, the question that Steve Jobs posed in this speech was this: if today is the last day I have to live, is what I'm about to do how I want to spend my time? And if the answer is no, long enough, then he would radically change. So I stepped back and started thinking about it, and I realized that I had been taught to spend all of my time showing clients, convincing prospects about technical financial planning things, about taxes, about money. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, and I think my team and I did them really, really well, but it was missing something maybe more fundamentally important, which is what actually is the most important thing to my client? What are their core values? How do they actually make the biggest decisions of their life? So I stepped back and I looked at the industry and I realized we're missing the most important part of the conversation. Over the next few weeks, I wrote the business plan and the planning system that we follow here at LifeWorks. And in some regards, it was just radically simple and clear for me. In fact, here's the formula if you haven't seen this before or if one of our advisors hasn't shared it with you. It goes like this: values, what's most important to you and why? Vision, how do you want to live life? And then the third component, so it's values plus vision plus strategy. That oftentimes is what we would skip to. We'd skip right to the strategy, techniques, estate planning, financial planning, taxes. But if you miss the first two inputs, if you miss what matters most to you, if you miss getting really clear on how you want to live your life, then it's almost impossible to make wise decisions with your money and your financial resources. It's values plus vision plus strategy equals wise decisions. So when we launched LifeWorks in 2017, I had been fortunate that somebody had recommended this book to me, The Council of Dads. And this is probably a book that I've recommended more than any other book. I've bought maybe 1,000 copies at this point in time. We've given them away to clients and advisors. And when people oftentimes ask me, what about that is so important? It's a fabulous book. But it's a book that I believe, maybe better than any other one I've read, helps point out the glaring truth to us. That when we are faced with life's most important decisions, when we are potentially confronted with our mortality, how we make decisions and how we prioritize things and what's really important to us become clear. So in this book, the author, Bruce Feiler, he had written multiple books before that. He had won many awards. He wrote a really great book called Walking the Bible, where he spent years walking all the geographic locations in the Bible, taking pictures, interviewing people. And then one day, shortly after he had had his twin daughters, he went for a routine medical exam. He was getting ready to write a new book where he was essentially going to be walking America. And they ran some routine tests, and his doctor called him back to the office and said, something came up on your tests, and we're not really sure what it is, but we'd like you to go see this specialist. And you might have heard this story before. You might have lived a story similar to this. He goes and sees a specialist. They run some more tests. And that doctor tells him, you have a very rare form of cancer. In fact, it's very aggressive. I would actually advise you to go home and get your affairs in order, was what the doctor told him. On his way home from the doctor's office, he starts the book by sharing how he was thinking about his twin daughters and his wife, and his little girls were young. I think they were 2 or 3. And his mind was thinking about all the things he was going to miss about their life, their kindergarten graduation, their ballet recitals, graduating from high school, their wedding. But at the end of that, he stopped and something switched, and he said, but what are they going to not have from me, their dad? So I want to just read you an excerpt from this. A few days later, I woke up suddenly before dawn, and I thought of a way that I might help recreate my voice for my daughters. So I started making a list of 6 men from all parts of my life, beginning from when I was a child and stretching through today. These are the men that know me best, the men who share my values. They're the men who helped shape me and guide me, who traveled with me, studied with me, and have been through pain and happiness with me. They are men who know my voice. So that morning I composed this letter, and it went like this. I believe my daughters will have plenty of resources in their lives. They'll have loving families. They'll have welcoming homes. They'll have each other. But they may not have me. They may not have their dad. Will you help be their dad? Will you listen to them? Will you answer their questions? Will you take them out to lunch every now and then? Will you go to a soccer game if you're in town? Will you watch their ballet moves for the umpteenth time? And when they get older, will you indulge them in a new pair of shoes, or buy them a cell phone, or some other gadget that I can't even imagine now? Will you give them advice? Will you be tough as I will be? Will you help them out in a crisis? And as time passes, will you invite them to family gatherings on occasion? Will you introduce them to somebody who might help one of their dreams come true? Will you tell them what I would have been thinking? Will you tell them how proud of them I am? Will you be my voice? So he writes 6 letters to 6 men, and he asks these men to step in and be his council of dads for his daughters. And it's a beautiful book, but the point, the essence of this is that he was very intentionally trying to capture his core values. And faced with his uncertain and perhaps sooner rather than later death, he realized that the most important thing wasn't to make sure he had his trust in place, or that he filed his taxes, or that he rebalanced his 401k, or that he made an IRA contribution. He realized that the most important thing was getting clear on what his daughters and his family would need the most from him. And it was recognizing that transferring values to them was the best thing that he could do. So it's a wonderful book. The pictures that you see behind me were my attempt to start doing that for my family and for my team here at LifeWorks. Each one of these portraits behind me represents one of my core values. And when I face tough decisions, whether it's at work or as a parent, or I'm thinking about money, I go back to what are the things that are most important? What are the things that matter the most to me? Over 20 plus years of being a financial advisor, and the last 4 years being the full-time CEO of LifeWorks Advisors, I would say I've been both fortunate and, unfortunate to have clients that have passed and have been invited to memorial services and funerals. Fortunate in that they cared enough about me and that I had a relationship with them where they asked me to participate. Obviously unfortunate because of the sad event. And they've never gone to somebody's funeral memorial service and heard them talking about, man, they did a great job managing their 401k, or they did such a great job with their taxes, or if they would have only invested. You get the point here. But our industry, the financial planning, wealth management industry, spends all of our time talking to our clients about money, about techniques, about strategies. And don't get me wrong, those things can be important, they can have their place. But those things, without first having clarity around what's most important to you, your values, and how you want to live your life, are meaningless. So after this event in 2015, this phone call I had with my dad and some soul searching when I launched LifeWorks, one of the things that I was committing to was helping our clients get clear and make meaning out of their money and then live intentional lives. In fact, one of the questions I would ask people when they would talk to me about retirement or some kind of plans for the future is I would say, what is it that you want to do tomorrow or at some point in the future that you can't actually do today? And if you could do that thing today, why wouldn't we just make it happen? When we're faced with these major life-changing events and we sit still for a moment and think about it, our priorities become clear. So whether you're getting ready to retire, whether you've been retired for years, whether you're maybe my age in your mid-40s and you have young kids at home and life is hectic and busy and you've got a career and a business and you're pursuing things, my invitation to you is to spend some time getting really clear on your core values. I think the book, The Council of Dads, is a wonderful tool to help do that. As the book progresses, the end of the book, there's a beautiful piece, and I'll wrap up with this. He's talking about the reflections of the past year, of these letters, these interactions, of struggles with cancer. And he realizes this. He says the paradox of being a parent is that we must make ourselves unneeded. But the paradox of being a child is that you discover how much you need your parents only after you think you don't. You spend your whole lives making yourself independent, and you go forth on your own. And exactly the moment you stop listening to us, you finally hear what we've been saying all along. Leaving money and financial assets to our kids or to our beneficiaries, to our family, is a good thing. Transferring values, transferring the voice that they're going to hear years down the road, and potentially financial resources, empowers them to live a life of meaning and purpose and might just change the world. So I'd like to close with 3 questions that we find to be really helpful and that I would challenge you to do. They're very simple. First question is this. If you knew you had 365 days left to live, you have 1 year, who are the top 5 people in your life that you're most responsible to prepare for your passing? Stopping the hecticness and the busyness of life for a moment and focusing on this question is really, really eye-opening. If you had 1 year left to live, what do you need to do? Who do you need to do it for? Then the second question, which follows the first, is what do you need to transfer to them or to teach them or to give them to prepare them? It might be conversations, it might be a letter, it might be reconciling with that family member that you haven't talked to in years. Third question, if 365 days turned into 24 hours, is what you're about to do today the thing that you'd want to do if it was your last day? Is there a conversation? Is there a letter you should write? Is there a hug you should give? Because at the end of the day, we spend our lives, most of our lives, trading our time for money. And money is just a store and a measure of time. If money is the objective, that's like saying we're going to go on vacation and our destination's a gas station. We'll get there, we'll fill the tank back up, and it'll be empty and meaningless. So we spend the majority of our lives, our young lives, working, trading our time for money, with the idea that at some point in time we're going to trade our money back for time. But we don't know. Time is the one asset that is the most precious for all of us, that we don't know how much of it we have. So when we get clear on our values and what's most important to us, and from there we can interrogate and say, what's the life that I should be living? What are the intentional action steps that I should be taking? The decisions around money, what jobs to have, how much to save, things like that, become just technical techniques. They become easy and clear. When values are known and vision is clear, how to live life and how to make decisions becomes easy. At LifeWorks Advisors, we believe that our job is to help our clients make meaning out of their money, to get clear on their values, what's most important to them, how they want to live their life, and then empower you to live intentionally. So remember this simple equation: values plus vision plus strategy equals wise decisions. And I'd encourage you, spend some time thinking about your core values. What is it that makes you you? What is it that's most important to you? You will not be disappointed in that work. The conversations, the letters, the memories that you'll make for those that you love and for yourselves are worth it.